Well, thank you very much, everybody, for being here. Thank you very much to both teams for what has been an extremely entertaining and extremely interesting debate. All the judges were agreed on a couple of things. We were agreed that it was a very close debate. We were agreed that there were some very high standards of argumentation within this debate. We were agreed that there were very strong standards of style and rhetoric and engagement between the teams. One thing we were not agreed on was the results. This debate has gone by a split decision to the winning team. And I'll give you an idea of some of the different trends of thought in that the judges had before eventually going on to which team has won this debate. First thing I'll comment on are the speaker's style. Something very important in this format of debating. It's worth 40% of the marks, and indeed, in a very close debate, a significant edge can be gained in that way. It's not something in this debate, though, that either team had a particular advantage on, because all the speakers were clearly very competent public speakers, speakers who made very clear attempts to reach out to and engage with the audience and come across persuasively. This was a debate where the style was very good. One thing I will caution a couple of speakers on is getting carried away. There was a lot of content in this debate, and it's tempting to try and cram it all in. But nevertheless, the speed at which speakers speak is very important. Sometimes when we're judges and we're sitting there trying to write down point by point by point, and we're finding it difficult to keep up with what the speaker's saying, that's an indication the speaker's going a little bit too fast. And speakers have to remember that while in debating sometimes it is acceptable at times to speak a little bit faster, perhaps than in other forms of public speaking. The best debaters do not speak like a freight train from start to finish of an 8-minute speech. There will be some variation. There will be pauses in a speech. And pauses are perfectly natural things in a speech. For some reason, a lot of debaters seem to think they should either cut them out or replace them with the phrase "ladies and gentlemen." But in fact, it's perfectly fine to pause in a speech, give the audience a chance to catch their thoughts for a second, give yourself a chance to catch your breath, and then vary the tone and the speed that you're going at a little bit as we move from point to point. So some of the speakers would have liked to have seen a little more vocal variety and perhaps slowing down speeds at some critical points, particularly when they're listing their structure and they'd like us to write them down. What we had in this debate was a fairly clear case set up by the team from Ireland about making all forms of drugs legal. Some elements put into their case, such as having a doctor having to prescribe them in order to being able to consume them. And that point indeed became quite a significant issue within the debate, and we felt the Koreans did a good job of making that into an issue and questioning them on just why have you thrown this in. Is it in fact contrary to the Hippocratical oath that doctors are expected to take? Are we putting doctors into difficult a position? Is it indeed going to achieve the harm reductions that you've said it would? And the Irish did make some attempts to come back at this and try and bolster the reasons for it. We would have liked to have heard more clear reasons why this was an element of the policy right from the beginning when they set it out. So be aware that if you're going to add particular elements into a case, we'd like to see them very clearly laid out, the rationale behind them right from the beginning. There was some very good analysis on many of the issues in this debate. I think particularly the whole idea of looking at the black market. Is it in fact going to be reduced by this policy? Is in fact this policy going to increase it because people will choose to try and bypass the doctors? Is it in fact going to create certain ghettos in certain areas? Or is it in fact going to reduce that kind of problem? There was some excellent analysis at times on that from both teams. One thing we would have liked to have seen in this debate perhaps is a little more variety and a little less reliance on certain examples. There were certain things that came up several times in this debate. From the proposition we heard the dangers of rat poison being in drugs multiple times from every single speaker. We also, on the opposition team, heard the whole idea of the opium wars coming up more than a couple of times during the debate, when perhaps should have just been used as one example. And similarly, we had this whole issue of Afghanistan, what's happening there. And while we felt that the proposition did quite a good job of attacking that example, remember that attacking an example doesn't kill an argument. You've also got to attack the underlying logic behind it. So perhaps over-reliance on certain examples was perhaps criticism we could have on both sides in this debate. It was good that there were examples there. We would have liked to have seen more variety. Ultimately, I think the things that this debate came down to were a couple of things. One, which team had sustained its arguments from start to finish, right through all the speeches, and and continued to press those home most firmly, even right through to the reply speeches, because this was a very close debate. And also looking at the technical and structuring issues. Both teams did a good job of trying to set out a very clear case, dividing that between their speakers, and in the end, in a debate this close, which team can do a good job of really hitting on every single point that comes up during the course of the debate, and ticking them all off by the time the debate is finished in terms of rebutting everything the opposition has said, as well as doing that in a very clearly structured, systematic way, becomes very important. And there were some speeches in this debate where the structure was easier to follow from start to finish than the others. And those kind of technical things can be important in a debate this close. I think, as we were chatting outside, what became apparent from the adjudicators was that we felt that while there was a reasonable case set up from the Irish in the beginning, it was attacked in a much more sustained way in the first half of the debate on the Korean side. And we certainly felt that the first half of this debate fell to the opposition. Now, as the debate progressed, though, we started really looking at the sense of rebuttal that was coming through, the consistency that the teams were pushing through their arguments with, and really attacking every point in the debate. We felt that the second half of the debate probably gave an advantage to the proposition. So it's a question of weighing up in the end which team just had the slight advantage, taking all of those areas into account. That's a difficult thing for adjudicators to do, and we were not unanimous in the decision, but in the end, in a 2-1 split decision, this debate goes to Ireland.